Okay, if you clicked on this video, we're now going to be taking a look at the Mexican Cession and the Mexican-American War. Now, there are a lot of details that could be put into this, but for our purposes and for the purposes of kind of a general overview, we're just going to talk about some of the basic points of the Mexican-American War and the Mexican Cession. Included in this video, we'll also take a look at the California Gold Rush, and we'll kind of roll all that into there as kind of one of the immediate effects after the Mexican Cession. And we'll take a look at, the 49ers. We'll take a quick look at the Mormons settling in Utah in that territory. And we'll also take a quick look at Chinese immigration. All right, so if you watched the Texas video, that after the Americans annexed Texas, that Mexico was upset. There was this border dispute. All right, and during this time, James K. Polk is president. Starting in about 1845. Now, James K. Polk is a firm believer in manifest destiny, the belief that the United States will stretch from sea to shining sea. In 1845, the United States looks like this, right? We have all of this territory, none of this territory in 1845. And so what we see here is there's this boundary dispute. This map, if you kind of look a little bit closer here, we can see this dark pink. This is the area that Mexico views as Texas. If we look at this area right here, this striped area, this is the area that the United States views as Texas. So you can see there's all this disputed territory. And the boundary is based off either the Nueces River, which would be this smaller area, or the Rio Grande, which would be this larger area. And again, so on this map here, it's pretty much this area is what Mexico thinks of as Texas, and this area here is what the United States thinks of as Texas. We have a boundary dispute. And essentially what happens is James K. Polk urges the Americans to push down right onto the Rio Grande, right down into here, and to build a fort right on the edge of the Rio Grande. Polk is pretty aware that moving this boundary down to here, sending troops down to there, is going to provoke Mexico. And he's right, because eventually what happens is Mexico crosses over the Rio Grande. Polk and the Americans, Polk views this as an invasion by Mexico. Not only do Mexican troops cross, they open fire, killing or wounding 16 American soldiers. And boom, just like that, that's all President Polk needs. He goes back to Washington, D.C. Well, he was in Washington, D.C. He starts banging the drums of war and says, we need to declare war on Mexico. They just attacked. They've invaded our territory. Now, not everyone is as gung-ho as Polk and ready to go straight to war. Some are saying, you kind of provoked this. This is an unjust war. You pretty much started it. You poked the bear, knowing what was going to happen, and we should not be going to war with Mexico. It's even questionable that we have Texas in the first place. However, ultimately, by a pretty healthy margin, the United States Senate agrees to declare war on Mexico, and just like that, the Mexican-American War begins. Well, the Mexican-American War, it's a pretty quick affair for the Americans. Quickly, we're able to kind of take control of Texas. And after taking control of Texas, we move into New Mexico, and then further on into California, quickly taking control of this area. You see this area, the Mexican Cession right here, this orange area, was very sparsely populated. Not a lot of people living there. Also, Mexico didn't really control this area. They kind of let it go. They kind of neglected this area, which is why President Polk originally, prior to the Mexican-American War, and I guess I should have put this in at the beginning, prior to the Mexican-American War beginning, President Polk offered to buy that territory. Mexico said, no way, we're not going to sell it. We've got plans for it. Yeah, we know it's densely or sparsely populated, not a lot of people living here. We know we've kind of neglected it. We know it's kind of lawless right now, but we're going to get to it later. So Polk offers to buy it. Mexico says, no way. And then that's when the war begins, shortly after that. So again, American troops, they're able to quickly kind of move into this area here. General Stephen Kearny is able to kind of come in, roll right through here. And before you know it, this whole territory is pretty much under American control. Once we've taken control of this, the tide of the war heads south. And we start heading south, General Zachary Taylor, General Winfield Scott. We get as far south off the map, but as far south as Mexico City, and essentially take control of Mexico City. One Mexican general sitting off in the distance watching his city burn kind of mutters darkly, God is a Yankee, right? Referring to saying basically God must be on America's side for being able to plow through just like this. And at this point, the United States and Mexico decide to work out a treaty. The treaty is called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And the treaty, basically what happens is this. Some Americans say we should take all of this territory, all this white territory. They say, hey, we conquered it, we rolled through here, we should take this territory. But instead, the treaty says this. We get this area right here, known as the Mexican Cession. We get all of this territory, which is essentially half of Mexico's territory at the time. We agree to pay, I believe it was about $10 million for this territory. Or maybe it's 18 million, I'm confusing. I'll have to double check the numbers. But we'll pay Mexico some for the money, even though we're essentially saying you have to give it to us. And we agree to protect the Mexicans living in that territory. Now, we don't, and we kind of ignore that last bit, but we do get the Mexican Cession, this large orange territory here. Now, the debate over ratifying the treaty is a pretty healthy debate because many Americans, not many again, but there's a large number that are opposed to the war with Mexico in the first place. They say it's unjust, they say it's immoral, they say it's corrupt, and they say that we should not take this territory. Just Texas, right? They say basically our map, our U.S. map should look like this. This should all remain under Mexican control. So they're upset about that. But ultimately, we do get the Mexican Cession in the Treaty of Guadalupe, Hidalgo in 1848, which includes California. It also includes Utah, Nevada, parts of Colorado, Arizona. It includes much of the southwest United States, as you can see by this map. And that's essentially the story of the Mexican-American War. The territory becomes ours. We draw this line through here. Mexico retains that territory. Now, California, we know in 1849, about a year after the war ends, gold is discovered in California, which sets off the California gold rush. Tens of thousands of settlers flock to California, by any way they can get there, whether they, sail all the way around South America, whether they sail down through Central America across the Isthmus of Panama, or they come overland, they rush to California to find gold, hoping to strike it rich. Unfortunately, they don't strike it rich. There isn't much gold to be found. It's lawless, right? So it's very tense. There are murders, there are whippings, there are hangings, there are duels. It's a very rough and tumble place. Most of the miners are young men, looking to make it rich. They've spent all their money to get here. Very few females in this rough and tumble place. It's incredibly expensive, right? There's high demand for anything, for food, for flour, for eggs. There's high demand, but there's a low supply. So prices of goods are extremely high. People aren't making a lot of money. But what does ultimately happen is in 1850, California becomes a state because so many people have settled there. Not a lot of people strike it rich in the California gold rush, but a lot of people do head to California. One of the other groups that heads to California, coming from off the map, is the Chinese. The Chinese come and set up, look to start mining in this new territory here. Some of them would strike it rich, but most of them get out of the mining, mostly because they weren't treated very well. They weren't really respected. They were kind of persecuted, I guess we'll say. So many of the Chinese, that they kind of start setting up their own shops and things like that, and turn out to be fairly successful in the business side of things in the 1850s in California. So that's a very, very brief overview of the California gold rush. Not going to go into a ton of detail on it, but that kind of gives you the basic idea. 1849 gold is discovered, hence the name 49ers. Not a lot of people strike it rich. Another group that starts settling in this area, they come along the Mormon Trail. They are the Mormons. They settle in Salt Lake City, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, members of the Mormon religion, led by a man named Brigham Young. And they start settling in Salt Lake City. They're known for kind of their caring communities. They have this big sense of community. They were persecuted quite a bit back east, which is why they start heading west, especially after their leader Joseph Smith was killed. They decide, yep, we're going to get out of here. We're going to go set up our own community. In Salt Lake City, in present-day Utah, still a lot of members of the Mormon Church living in and around Utah. So again, right, this is all, of course, a result of the Mexican-American War and the Mexican Cession. But that's just kind of an overview of the Mexican-American War, the Mexican Cession, the Chinese, the 49ers, and the California Gold Rush, and the Mormons. At this point, feel free to click on to your next video. Either Louisiana Purchase, Florida, Texas, or Oregon Country, or the Gadsden Purchase.